I'm excited to present to you some information about Bhagavad Gita today. The mind. The mind has been discussed in many ways in the Vedic tradition, and one of them is, and I've mentioned this once or twice to you earlier, but I'll mention it again, we'll keep talking about it, that the outermost layer of the mind often has, by default, some negative emotions in it. These emotions can range from jealousy, possessiveness, egotism, sense of feeling less or smitten, angry, greedy, and they're kind of the uppermost layer of the mind. And they are known as malam. And malam in Sanskrit also means it's almost like a waste product. And our mind has some of that. So very quickly, the first reaction can be jealousy, or spite, or anger, or greed, or envy, or possessiveness. So these kind of emotional states are usually the first feeling or emotion, and that's the outermost layer of the mind, the most superficial layer. Below that is known as the layer of some restlessness. It is known as vikshepaha. And because of that, there is an inherent tendency to be a bit impulsive, a bit speeded up, a bit urgent at all times. We don't know why, but we feel this urgency, and it's coming from this layer underneath. I want to fall asleep, but I want to fall asleep now. So there's an urgency, there's a restlessness, there is a distractibility. And it's an outward movement constantly. So there's always a desire to think and think some more. There is a desire to assess and assess some more. There is a desire to talk and talk some more. There's a desire to lament and lament some more. There's a desire to laugh, but now I'm going to laugh a lot. So there is just a quickness, a tendency towards what in Sanskrit is known as chanchalya, constant motion. So this is what's happening in the second layer of the mind. In the deeper layer of the mind, or deeper to that, the deepest layer, there is dense ignorance. And it is known as avarna. And what avarna does is, it has a nature of covering. So it covers us from an inherent knowingness. All the Shastra, all the Vedic teachers, all the wise teachers of every tradition, not just the Vedic tradition, tell us that happiness, peace, and security live within you. Many traditions tell us this. Many wise teachers tell us, look within. But why is only an occasional person a Buddha and not every other person who sat under a tree to meditate? Why not? Because it is only the one Buddha who could penetrate through that dark layer of ignorance, which is composed of tamas, and it has one and only purpose of being like an obstructive wall between the self and the mind. So we just hit this wall, and when we dwell there a lot, it can feel like depression, heaviness, darkness. So look at an average mind. On the surface, it's super sensitive. It has all kinds of negative emotions that can get triggered, even if a person bypasses us on the freeway, and an emotion can get triggered and we can say something unpleasant. Why? Because our mind is composed of that negative emotion. We see somebody being successful, and instead of enjoying their success, we can get a twinge of envy or even anger. Why? Because that's where the mind is. So say we decide, well, I won't be envious, I think I'll do my own thing. We can't do it. Why? Because we are restless. So the mind goes from this task to that task, to procrastination, to making a list, to making a new list, to starting a new notebook, to rechanging the furniture, to changing the country. I guess I'll just change my profession. It's restlessness. And if we go through that restlessness, well, there's depression, there is sorrow, there is darkness. And the human mind just goes from this to this. Do you see that? This is an average, uninitiated mind. This is not your mind and not my mind. This is the human mind. The human mind. And the Shastra begins with observation. Shastra is those great Vedic texts that have three purposes. What they do is they command what we should do or not do. They enlighten us about our own self, and ultimately they protect us. So there's a whole body of wisdom literature from India known as the Vedic literature, which is known as Shastra. Shastra tells us that this is it, this is the mind, but here are some ways that we can overcome our negative emotions, the layer of negative emotions. Instead of leaving it negative, we can purify that layer. We can have pure emotions. Instead of being restless, it can become composed, steady, calm, focused. And instead of being unenlightened, ignorant at the deepest level, there can be the light of self-knowledge and greater knowingness. This can happen, says the Shastra. How? So the Shastra says, okay, let's look at the Vedas. The Vedas give us this. And the Vedas, they are 4 in number. The Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, the Yajurveda, and the Atharva Veda. And the Yajurveda is further divided into 2 parts, known as the Shukla Yajurveda and the Krishna Ajurveda. So there are these Vedas. They're very large compendium of mantras. And these mantras are almost, I don't have the exact number right now, but definitely more than 25,000 mantras if we put them all together. So they're a very large body of wisdom tradition, and we are told, well, this knowledge has the Veda has the knowledge that if we have it, the ordinary person, our mind will no longer be filled with negative emotions which cause us suffering, will no longer be restless and wondering, because of which we cannot achieve our goals, and will no longer be stuck in darkness, so that the concept of self and an inner empowerment remains a beautiful dream but doesn't become our destiny. And that we can actually achieve everything we want. And these Vedas have different, not only different books, but they have different sections. So the first part is known as the Mantra Bhaga, or the Samhita Bhaga. Bhaga means section. And the first part is that. Then the second part is known as Brahmana Bhaga. Third part is known as Aranyak Bhaga. And the fourth part is known as the Upanishad Bhaga. Now, interestingly, let's begin with the first, second, third, and fourth. Each Veda is broken up into these 4 sections, each Veda. So in the first part, Samhita, or the Mantra Bhaga, let's just call it the mantra part. In the first part of the Veda, there are all these hymns to various deities, like the god of air, the god of fire. So what do these hymns do? What these hymns do is they bring an divine enough environment so that a regular person like you and me stop blaming others and first look inward. So at least that's good. We start diagnosing the situation that we can blame others only so much. It's I can directly connect with the divine and work on myself. That's what the first part does. It brings a more spiritual attitude in the journey towards the Vedas. Okay? In the second part, known as the Brahmana Bhag, It teaches us the correct attitude and the correct actions to take in day-to-day life, in professional, engaged life. So, Brahmana Bhaga teaches us Karma Yoga. And according to the Vedas, when we study Karma Yoga, our negative emotions get purified. So, therefore, the Vedas, through its Brahmana Bhaga section, teaches Karma Yoga, which teaches us right action and right attitude in day-to-day engaged relationships and work. And because of that, and that's the area where maximum negative emotions get triggered, does it not? When we work together, when we cook together, when we eat together, when we make babies together, when we choose a president together, that's where we all have a lot of negative emotions. Our mind gets very triggered. So that's where Karma Yoga is very important for us, and the Veda teaches it. Then in the Aranyak Bhaga, which Aranyaks were written in the forest retreats, the rishis had gone into a retreat and they had written the Aranyaks. That is where they teach Upasana Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, because of which the restlessness of the mind becomes centered. So they teach various types of meditations, various types of spiritual practices like the Gayatri Mantra that calms the entire mind. So therefore this is also contained in the Veda. Finally, the Upanishads. The Upanishad section of each Veda, the Upanishad section of each Veda teaches us self-inquiry. Will I get peace outside me or is it inside me? I am begging for happiness everywhere. Does it ultimately live in a transaction between this person and me, or is it something I have to look within? In fact, I have to disengage and look within. And where is the ultimate security? Am I going to get it from my family, my government, my colleagues, my lover, my partner, my children, or am I going to find the ultimate security within me? This nature of self-inquiry, known as Jnana Yoga, this comes from the Upanishads. And what Jnana Yoga does is it completely removes that darkness, that wall between I and my true self. So it enlightens me. And so my whole mind becomes transformed. Instead of negative emotions, I have positive, beautiful, devotional emotions. Instead of restlessness, I have a calm, steady flame of a mind. And instead of darkness and self-ignorance and lack of self-knowledge of what I should do, who am I, what should be my real deep motivations, who can I depend on, I don't know any of this, right? All this lives in self-knowledge. This comes from the Upanishads. Okay. Now that's very interesting. So we can go to the Vedas, study something like 25,000 plus mantras, study ancient Sanskrit. But for the common person, that's not easy. And then we come to this Bhagavad Gita. Only 700 verses. And 700 is very easy compared to 25,000 verses to be found in different sections of different books. Therefore, Gita has a very special place. So if you are suffering from your own mind, may I see hands? Is your answer. And then I have great pride in introducing this. This is compiled by my own great-grandfather, Acharya Shanti Prakashji, our Bade Baba. And two Gitas were found in ancient times, one in the Java island in Indonesia on palm leaves, and one on copper plates in Farrukhabad in what is known as Uttar Pradesh today. These two Gitas were amalgamated together to come up with 84 verses, which was all edited and commented upon by Bade Baba. And these 84 verses are considered probably the seed of the 700 verses. Because the Gita was taught by the Guru to the Shishya, from the master to the disciple, in the middle of a battlefield. And probably 84 verses was all he really needed to convey. So this is considered, the 84 verses Adi Bhagavad Gita is considered as the very basic utterance of Krishna to Arjuna. And then the 700 verses grew as, with time, some of these, each shloka from the 84 were then further expanded to explain the point. So therefore, if you were to study this, all these shlokas can be found here. But if you were to only study this, we get the gist of the Gita. So this is highly respected. It is in very several editions. It was first printed in 1933 or 34. Sorry, I should know, but I have forgotten. And since then it has been constantly in print, and there are many scholars who go by this. But there is no, they study both. Gita scholars study both texts. So I'm very happy that this book contains a foreword by Bade Baba, and in the earlier print, of course, and then much later, after its many reprints, I see that there is a foreword added by Baba here. And there are some beautiful words that I might read for you. So we are definitely in the Bhagavad Gita family tradition. And for those of you students who will continue to study with me in the anchor group which goes forward and studies the Bhagavad Gita, I'm thinking that we will also go ahead and then do a recap of the 84 shlokas from Bade Baba's commentary, which is right here. So the Bhagavad Gita, 700 verses. An interesting background to this text. It is said to have been authored by a Rishi Vyasa, to whose tradition we associate with, scholarly tradition we associate with in our sampradaya, in our lineage. And the teachings happen of all places in a battlefield. Okay? And the Gita is in the form of a discourse between Guru, known as Lord Krishna, and the Shishya, known as Arjuna. It is so interesting that this is not a battlefield that happened a long time ago in the epochs of history. Because this battle actually represents the battle that we are dealing with every day. Do you know there is a battle you deal with when you want to take that extra scoop of ice cream or not? There is a battle. There is a battle that you face when you have to say no or yes to your boss on some matter or the other. There is a battle we deal with when we are facing unethical or cruel behavior by our own loved ones. We don't know what to do, what not to do. So therefore it's very interesting that the spiritual teachings are not taught aloft a mountain, near a river, with a waterfall on a meditation mat. This was taught in a very critical situation where this young prince Arjuna, no, he was not so young at that time, maybe in his 40s, but Arjuna had to claim his right to what was rightfully his land, his throne, which had been evilly taken over by his cousins. And for 13 years, Arjuna had contemplated and debated what should be the right action. He didn't know what to do. And because he was a sattvic person, a pure-hearted person, he tried everything. non-battle ways of getting back his land, his right to his kingdom. But the evil cousins, collectively known as Kauravas, were really evil. So finally a conclusion had come that the right thing to do is to go to battle, because this is not a battle for my land, this is a battle for righteousness, for dharma. But when he comes to the battlefield, his cousin, Krishna was his cousin, and also his guide. He had asked Krishna to be his charioteer. So he says to Krishna, full of strength and vigor of a warrior who's about to slay many people, take me close to where that next army is standing. Let me see who are the people who are trying to please my evil cousins. Let me go and see. Let me get more adrenaline pumping through me. And you know, gurus, they play a trick on you. Krishna was his guru. So what he did was, he took Arjuna's chariot close to where, in the opposing army, his own grandfather, his beloved grandfather Bhishma was standing, and Dronacharya, one of his teachers, one of his gurus who had taught him warfare, archery, he was standing there. And while the evil cousins were there, led by the eldest of the evil cousin, there were 100 of them, known as Duryodhana. They were there for evil reasons. They wanted to have not only their land, but his land also. But people like their common grandfather, their common archery teacher Drona, they were not there because for evil reasons. They were there because it was their duty to be there. They had to support the king, the evil king. So when our hero Arjuna sees his own grandfather and sees his own archery guru, something happens to him. He starts having the memory of his love and affection and his reverence for his grandfather and his guru. And I guess it seems right too. How can I kill them, Krishna? He says. How can I raise my bow against these beloved people? It may be better that I don't fight. It may be better that I give up my land and I give it to them. The evil king Duryodhana, the evil prince Duryodhana, let me give it to them. I can't deal with it. And after 13 years of deliberation, some time of diplomacy, he had finally come to this conclusion that yes, it was dharmic to have a war. But then when he saw his uncles, brother-in-laws, nephews, and other known faces in the army, he became very weak. He didn't start crying because he had some amount of sattva in him or mind control, but he became very weak. His eyes were as if shimmering with tears, and his famous bow Gandiva he put on the floor and he could not fight. And if you look in your own life, sometimes we have to take a strong action against the very people we love. Sometimes we have to speak up or say something or do something because it's the right thing to do. And we're unable to do it because we have threads of attachment. Would you agree? Yeah, we have threads of attachment which make us weak. So the first chapter is all about the yoga of Arjuna's depression or collapse. He collapses in the face of what he had wanted to do. He had wanted to achieve something. So we have the most dire scenario of war and bloodthirsty calls. And Arjuna, who had been not only his land had been taken away, the way Duryodhana and those evil cousins had schemed to take away the land was also very evilish. What happened was that Duryodhana's father, his name is Dhritarashtra, who was the king at that time, he was blind. He said that I am getting old, so let me divide up this kingdom between my sons, the Kauravas, and between my brother's sons, the Pandavas. Pandava, of which Arjuna belongs to, are 5 noble-hearted boys. And the blind sons, evil children, are 100 in number, known as Kauravas. So he divided it up. And what our 5 noble princes, the Pandavas, did was they built up their kingdom to great glory, known as Hastinapur. They were beautiful, sattvic, noble beings, and their Hastinapur shone like 100 suns. It had so much beauty and nobility. And they also married Princess Draupadi, and that was a very strong political alliance. All of this was growing. Guess what happened to Kaurava and his other 99 brothers? Guess what happened in their minds? They all got jealous. They got envious. They got greedy. And they just got angry, which is what an uninitiated mind does at the success and the happiness and the comfort and the peace and the pleasures of his 5 brothers, of their cousins. So what they schemed was, they said, let's call them on a game of dice. And they cheated on that game. And Duryodhana and his brothers, 99 other brothers, I'm going to be saying Duryodhana and the 99 other brothers, or the Kauravas, they cheated. And they unfairly took away Hastinapur from the 5 noble princes. On top of that, they ill-treated and they mistreated their wife in public. On top of that, they said that you get exiled for 12 years, and then in the 13th year you can come out, and you have to still live in secrecy, and in case we spot you, you have to go back to exile for 12 years, which in effect means that the kingdom would be enjoyed by Duryodhana with the blind king and his 100 evil sons. And the blind king's role was just blind. He was just like the king. He could have said, no, this is unfair. I won't let that happen. But he had love and attachment for his 100 sons. So he had what's called as learned helplessness. But after all, I am blind. But after all, I am myself a victim. So how can I help? And how can I stop? So he was just a helpless, blind king. The 100 sons were aggrandizing, greedy, cheating, malefic. And guess what the 5 nice people do? Guess what the nice people do? They don't speak back. They don't talk back. They don't fight back. They just go into exile. Isn't that what non-violent people do? They just go and be in exile. That's what they did. And in the 13th year, they were almost found out, but it was the last day, so all was well. So they went back and said, look, we've lived for exile in 12 years, and 1 year we have lived in secrecy, so 13 years have passed. Can we have our kingdom back, please? They asked very politely. Guess what Duryodhana said? No. Just a flat out no. No. Isn't that what happens sometimes? You feel like you've earned it, and then you get a no. No. So the 5 brothers, the Pandavas, they go to their common cousin. Krishna was a cousin to both. God is a cousin to both, the evil and the good. So they go to Krishna and they say to Krishna, we don't want to go to war. Isn't that what noble people don't want? We don't want to go to war. We don't want to confront. We don't want to have to ask. Can you please explain the Kauravas, that they should give us our land back. We'd like diplomacy first. Good job. So Krishna goes and tries all kinds of diplomacy, and guess what Duryodhana, the evil prince, says, their leader? No. I want war. I want war. They can come and take it from me, otherwise I'm not giving it. I'm fine for war. So you can see that with all these slights and insults and humiliation, it was time for the Pandavas to claim not only what was theirs rightfully, but also readdress the humiliation and to also relieve the world of those sinful 100 sons. It's very interesting. You know, that blind king, this entire battle of the Mahabharata, which is the bigger epic in which the 700 verses of the Bhagavad Gita are located, is really the battle of the human being and an internal saga. You know, that blind king, it represents our own blind, rudderless ego mind. And it has 100 desires that it tends to overlook and let them do their thing. Isn't that what we do? We just wear a blindfold and we let our desires clamor and even compromise dharma at times. And that is what this blind king and the 100 sons, beginning with Duryodhana, represent. And it's very interesting that this blind king had a wife. What was her name? Gandhari, who could see when she first married the blind king. She could see. It's a beautiful, radiant, bright woman. But out of false loyalty to an unworthy husband, false loyalty, undeserved love to an undeserving husband, she says, "Oh, I'm a great woman of great character. If you are suffering from blindness, my master, I too shall become blind in my empathy for you." And she took on a blindfold and put it on her eyes. So though she had eyes, she became blind. This is called foolishness. And so Gandhari here represents, what do we do with our reason we blindfold it to? There is a part of us that could possibly see. She could have told her husband, she could have been his eyes, but instead she also wears a blindfold. So we have a blind husband and wife, husband by birth, wife by foolish choices, infatuation, wrong loyalty, misplaced loyalty, blind. They have spawned 100 sons, beginning with Duryodhana, who only want. They want more, and they live. They have the typical mind. They are negative emotions, anger, jealousy, rivalry, restless, and completely ignorant of who are they really. They are just in that moment fighting, wanting, claiming, desiring, conquesting. Okay? It's very interesting that in spite of all the reasons for him to go to war, when the actual time to go to war comes, Arjuna becomes weak. More than weak, he gets deluded. He does not know whether it is dharmic to go to war or adharmic. He actually tells Krishna, "This will be great adharma if I go to war." And he's a warrior by birth and by his work. He's a Kshatriya Varna. We have talked about Varnas in this classroom. It's his duty to go to war. But he said, "I think," and here's what he said. He sounded just like all of you. He said, "I think I should renounce the world." So it was time for him to go to the Himalayas and become pseudo-spiritual. I think I shall renounce the world. So spoken just like any other person who gets stressed out and says, it's time for me to renounce the world in a very grand manner, which meant, I think I'm escaping this. So dharma appeared like non-dharma to him, duty felt like it was wrong, and his strength became, he forgot his own strength. He was such a mighty warrior. He was such a mighty warrior that the divine celestials had gathered up in the heavens to cheer him. Look, Arjuna is coming. You know, when some great player is coming on the field, in tennis or basketball or cricket or whatever, even the opponent party gets excited. A great player is coming. Might lose from that player, but at least watch that player. In the same way, when Arjuna was about to fight, even those 100 cousins and their supporters were saying, we're going to watch Arjuna fight today. Arjuna was that kind of a mighty warrior, a legendary warrior. And the entire world had taken sides. It was a beautiful, epical battle that had been drawn out. And this mighty Arjuna, with nobody less than Krishna, who was a king and also known for some spiritual powers, although some people question that. He was being the charioteer, and there he sits there and talks like a depressed person, knowing not what to do. And I think this happens to a lot of us. At a crucial juncture and on a day-to-day level, we don't know what to do. We get confusion between what path will lead me to dharma, which is, dharma is that which is the right action. And the right action, it's not just a self-serving right action. It is an action that will not violate anybody else. Plus, it will have immediate benefit and long-term benefits. So what is dharma and what is adharma? Adharma can sometimes give us instant pleasure, but in the long run, it will give us sorrow. That is adharma. So we get confused between what should we do, what should we not do. And so in the first chapter, we really have a discussion of this whole battlefield and what happens to Arjuna. So Arjuna's despondency, which is a universal despondency, gets introduced. Plus we get introduced to Guru and Shishya. We get introduced to a master and disciple tradition, where a master explains to the disciple. Now this is very interesting. Now it's interesting that first Arjuna sees his grandfather and his teacher and his cousins and his nieces and not nieces and his nephews and his brother-in-laws and other people, and he gets very shaken up and he gets confused. So he develops a delusionary state of mind known as Moha. Once Moha occurs, he starts blabbering. Isn't that what happens to all of us also? When we are clear, we can say something in few words. Yep, I'm doing it. No, I'm not doing it. This is how I'm doing it. But when we are unsure, we blabber. So there is some blabbering from Arjuna. He gives all kinds of reasons to Krishna why he should not fight, why this war will damage the whole planet and nature and all those kind of things. He blabbers. And then finally, because he's a wise person ultimately, that is why Krishna spoke to him, he sees his own blabbering and he says, Krishna, I am confused. Please help me. This is the parampara. The student says, teacher, I have an issue. Please help me. It takes some of us many lifetimes to accept that I have a confusion. It takes many lifetimes. We keep blaming, no, but it is those people. It is that person's habits. It's that person's personality. It is my karma. Gods are against me. But we rarely come to this understanding, Krishna, I am confused. And until that time, Krishna was just trying to wake him up, but finally he starts teaching. So then from chapter 2, verse 11, all the way till chapter 18, so 17 chapters are in a way the teaching that happens. And at the end of all of this teaching, Krishna asks Arjuna, is your moha, is your own mental self-created delusion clear now? He says, and Arjuna says, yes, it's clear, I'm going to war. So, you can understand why these 700 verses or these 84 verses are very critical for us too. Because once we know this wisdom that's contained, these 84 belong to the 700, they are not separate. Once we have this wisdom too, then on the battlegrounds of life, we shall have a better determination or keenness as to what we have to do. So therefore, this is a time immemorial book or wisdom that empowers us, and it helps us discover the right path. So now, a very interesting question. Why did Arjuna spend so much time, 700 verses, talking to Arjuna and telling her to go to war? I mean, he was God after all. He could have gone to Duryodhana and said, don't fight. He could have gone to Duryodhana and explained to him, don't fight. And then there would have been no war. And life would be all sweet and wonderful and non-violent and cheerful and pretty, right? So I wrote his answer down in case you ask this question. So here's what Arjuna says. He says, Janami dharmam nacha me pravritti, janami dharmam nacha me nivrittihi. Tvaya rishikesha hidi sthitena yatha yunukta tatha karoti. He says, look at what he answers, Duryodhana. When Krishna was just beginning to talk to him about dharma, here is what this particular candidate answers. Look, Krishna, I know what is dharma. And I know what is adharma also. Deep down I know that what is the wrong path. I should not have gone there. I should not go there. I know it. And I know what is the better path. But it looks like the gods of all the senses are sitting in my heart. And they are directing me what to do. So I am following my senses. My senses says, here is a beautiful woman, Draupadi, grab her. Here is some more land, go for it, become more powerful. Be devious, do whatever. Because I am just following what my mind is seeing. I'm just going there. I know. And I want to tell you that most of us are like Duryodhana. We are hearing inside us an inner voice which says, this is the right path, but we don't have an interest in following it. We also get an inner criticism saying, don't follow that path, don't take this action, don't eat this food, don't talk like this, but we have no interest in resisting it. And we just follow what is coming to our mind. And so therefore Duryodhana was unteachable. Duryodhana was unteachable. Another thing, just before the war, because he's a common cousin, Krishna went up to Duryodhana and he was, both of them went up to Krishna. Whose side will you be on? So Krishna says, for one of you I can join you, and the other person can have my army, my cavalry, my elephants, my horses. So guess what Duryodhana chose? The material-minded person could not see the Guru waiting and said, I want your horses and your cavalry, and I want your people, your men, to fight in my army. And Arjuna said, I want you. I want you, you are my friend, you are my guide. And so what started out as cousins, which became friends, later revealed itself to be Guru and then God. So it's very interesting that from the very beginning, Krishna is projected as a very intelligent person, very wise person. But as an avatar, as a guru, and then as an avatar, it gets revealed in Bhagavad Gita. Some people, such as Duryodhana, the 100 Prince, even call him a scoundrel. So many times, without a spiritual sight, you can have a very divine person amidst you, but you may not take benefit from them because you don't recognize them, because your mind cannot see. Why was Duryodhana like this? And why was Arjuna led on a whole process? Why is this entire text relevant to us? Let me explain a little bit. So the Shastra says, the Veda says that this is a very common teaching that the mind, there are two faculties of thought within the mind, within the thinking apparatus, known as chitta. One is known as mind, the other is known as intellect. Okay? So mind is known as manas, and intellect is known as buddhi. Have you heard of the word buddhi? There is also ego, known as ahankara. There is also memory, known as smriti. But I will just focus on mind and intellect right now for you. This is a very popular teaching. This is not a unique teaching in Vedanta. I'm just bringing it forward for you to pay attention to. They are both made up of thought. But what is the difference between mind and intellect? Do you know? Does anybody know? Okay. You are saying that buddhi or intellect can discern and discriminate, which mind cannot do. Why? Because mind is driven by the senses. Okay, you're close. Yes?
You have the feeling that I can constantly work with my intellect. I can make progress with it in a way that my mind kind of seems a little more temporary.
So, you're very good. Both of you are correct. The mind, both of them are thoughts. But it is a mind when the thoughts are still in a state of flux. Mind is in a state of flux, so it's constantly changing. So there is nothing you can work with. It's constantly changing based on input. So it sees a beautiful woman and the mind becomes lusty. Then it sees an old woman who's dying and the mind starts saying, oh no, life is so miserable, and it starts crying. So it just changes. So the mind is constantly changing. At the intellect level, the mind starts, the same thoughts start slowing down and start stabilizing into more concrete ideas, building blocks of thoughts. So this is a difference, a very big difference, that the mind can only look outwards. So its only reality is outwards. So it relies on the senses and it conjures up reality based on what it sees. Buddhi or intellect is that internal thought scope that can actually look within. So the mind cannot report to you, I am calm. Or even if you notice your anxiety, this is all inward. That is the work of the intellect, which says, I am, it's a deeper level, a deeper deliberation that can happen with the level of intellect. Now, what the mind likes to do is, it likes to trick us. The mind likes to imagine, and it imagines all kinds of scenarios. future scenarios, past scenarios, longitude, latitude scenarios. It likes to, I was writing to one of the students, then it looks like a bowl of noodles. That's the mind. Everything is all like that. Okay? And the intellect, on the other hand, is a sorted out structure. Okay. So the mind likes to imagine, and so it likes to trick us. So we think, oh, we got it, but we didn't get it. Oh, but it should be this way, but it's that way. Oh, it should be up there, but it's down there. Oh, but I thought I got it. It should be X, it's Y, because that's just the way it is. On the other hand, the intellect, instead of tricking us, it guides us. It informs us. It turns on the light and investigates discrimination, whether that is the case or not. How wonderful to have an intellect. The mind only wants to live past or future. It's very skittish in the present. It likes to live in memories, it projects in the future, and it keeps spinning stories, story after story after story after story after story after story. I'll tell a story, in that story there's another story, from that story let's open another story. Oh, in the story there are 3 windows, 3 stories, in the 3 story, 5th stories, story after story after story. Such is the nature of the life of the mind. The intellect, on the other hand, dares to be present in the present and say, well, that is past, so we need only that much information from it. That's the future, let's not rush too much. It can slowly create a more moment by moment, present moment reality reports. It's not trying to create a story. It can see beyond the story and say, that's a story. It is only people like Duryodhana and the evil brothers who are like, yeah, I want this, so I have a story, so let's go to war. And they are ready for anything. It's impulsive, it's excitable, it gets easily, it feels urgency at all times. I feel urgent, need to do this. Anytime anything feels urgent, you want to question, is it really urgent? Now, that word doesn't live in my vocabulary. Nothing is urgent. That's just my mind saying it's urgent. A lot of the times I have time to take 5 breaths and a walk around my neighborhood, and it's still not urgent. So it's not really urgent. So this is all the mind doing it. Yeah? But whereas, so therefore, I wrote some things. So the mind tends to be caught up in a vortex, every mind. Even Arjuna's mind in that battlefield had got caught up in a vortex of this and that and if and but. It's caught up in a vortex. And the intellect guides us through the vortex. Okay. Intellect sounds wonderful. So we are all pretty saved by our own intellect. But the thing is that the intellect is asleep for all of us, until it is awakened and fortified and strengthened. So human beings have been given a marvelous thinking apparatus. So we think we are thinking, but the real thinking doesn't really happen by the mind because it changes its thoughts by the second, by the nanosecond. The real thinking apparatus is only the intellect, which thinks through and thinks one chain of thought to a conclusion to the next chain of thought, and clearly drives the thinking process to the objective goal and stays there. So a new belief system can be created. So when we say we're thinking, human beings are thinking beings, probably not. We have to own our thinking apparatus, which is the intellect. And we have to think that right now we can think that any time I had all these scenarios and then one clear light came through which connected this thought, rejected that thought, moved forward in a reasoning way, in a discerning manner, in a logical manner, in a rational manner, then that is my intellect. So therefore my rational thinking faculty is intellect and my irrational thinking faculty is my mind. But most of us are driven by the irrational thinking faculty. And when we are 100% driven by our intellect, we are what is known as normal. But when we are only driven by the mind and what lives there is feelings and emotions and quirks and attitudes and whims and memories, then we are probably, to the degree with which the mind versus intellect plays out in us, to that degree we are insane, rational or irrational. Don't take it personally. This is the human universal situation. So what the Bhagavad Gita is trying to tell us is, what the Bhagavad Gita is saying is that blind king, his blind wife, the blind wife is like a blinded intellect, and the 100 spawned desires and actions which led to adharma and ultimate ruin and destruction. They represent a mind which does not have an intellect to guide it. So the Bhagavad Gita says that your own mind becomes your bandhu or your friend when it is paired with its intellect. And that same mind becomes our own enemy when the intellect is separated from it. So therefore, we have in the case of the evil 100 brothers and their blind father and mother, purposefully blind and born blind. We have a scenario of a typical rudderless, conscienceless mind. Is just feeling, reacting, acting, etc. With the Pandavas, we have rational intellect. But then we have the collapse of the intellect due to attachments. Because moha, an attachment came over. And so what happens is, if the intellect is not fortified, then an attachment can come over and the intellect can collapse. So until the intellect is strong, fortified, you will notice that you're moving in a rational manner and you're enjoying life and you are creating dharma and enjoying the fruits of dharma, and then come across some very strong attachment or emotion and boom, you collapse into the irrational. And that's where you have an episode. And so our Arjuna was having an episode of intellect failure and the complete mind taking over. On top of that, this mind, I told you it looks like a bowl of noodles to me. These noodles grow infinitely very quickly. So once it starts feeling sorry for itself, it can feel sorry to the point of committing suicide. Once it falls in love, it will fall in love to the point of going to Las Vegas and marrying the wrong person. Anything can happen here. Happiness, sorrow, sex, crime, this all happens at the level of the mind. It grows at the speed of like a computer virus. Very fast. Intellect, on the other hand, holds and grows slowly, such as here in the satsang, idea after idea. Every satsang that you come to, what do you grow? Do you grow a muscle? Do you grow a bone? Do you grow more calcium? You grow and nurture and fortify and strengthen your intellect. So much so that when I'm not there, your intellect rescues you from your own mind. Yes or no? May I hear a yes? Yes. So you say, Shunyaji, you did it. You helped me. But actually, your intellect, which is meant to be your inner guide, your inner force, your own mind is meant to help you, helps you. So until our own intellect is developed, the mind, it keeps saying, it keeps going, it interacts even with the guru in a mind manner, with the mind. I want to sit in front of the guru and I like the guru a lot, or I'm going to stay there and audit the guru. The guru didn't look at me, so I don't like the guru liked me, so I like the guru. It's all just changing constantly. When intellect occurs, the student stabilizes. And the guru understands who is the guru, who am I, what is Shastra, what is Ishvara, who is Brahman, and understands the scheme and understands their part in it. So this intellect tends to drown out and remains actually latent until it is activated. In the ancient days, so the Gurukulam system of education, this is what we nurtured, the intellect. Nowadays, in the education, we fill the mind with information and we have no concerns about the intellect. So, either due to past life or something, if we have a better intellect, we have a better life. But in case we don't, we have an impulsive life, we have a reactionary life. We just live based on whatever. If our family is nice, we have a good life. If our family is dysfunctional, we have a bad life. Because the mind cannot find anything but to react. Whereas the intellect can look at a difficult situation and say, I think I'm fine. I'm going to milk this difficult situation and meditate. If it's a good situation, the intellect will say, okay, good time to review my Shastra. So, the intellect can find its way. So this is really important for you to know that what Bhagavad Gita is actually trying to do is not trying to, it's a kind of religion. It's the highest text of the Hindu tradition. I have to tell you that. Why? Because it is empowering each being to become a caretaker of their own self and fully aligned with dharma, and thereby the cosmic dharma also takes place. So it is a very high order, high standard text, and at least the way I will teach it. I do want to tell you that there are several ways of studying Bhagavad Gita. This is perhaps, the Upanishads are not so easy to translate or teach or preach. And Brahma Sutra is so esoteric that only Baba could deal with it. Bhagavad Gita is one of the easier texts, so it has so many commentaries, so many interpretations, so many YouTube teachings, so many renderings, so many versions that you need not come back here to somebody like me to study. You can teach yourself. Now, there is a difference between studying Bhagavad Gita like a story or like a text of teaching good things that you can do on your own. But when you receive teaching slowly, systematically, with periods of time in between for you to listen, then practice, mananam, contemplate, and finally you do nididhyasanam. What does that mean? We say here in, how do we translate nididhyasanam in Vedika? Practice. What is practice? What is the practice of Bhagavad Gita? Here is the practice. Let me clarify to you what I expect from you in this curriculum of Bhagavad Gita. Next time you have an emotional problem, you use this knowledge of mind versus intellect to deal with it. When you start using knowledge to encounter emotional problems, right? Because ignorance or our darkest part of the mind comes out in our relationships, does it not? Our restlessness, our negative mind, our restless mind, and our ignorant dark mind, it all comes out personified in intimate relationships, intimate or professional. So next time you have relationship issues, how about you use the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita to deal with it? internally, not preach them, internally. Then you shall know that you are really learning Bhagavad Gita. You can always pick up a book. Then I want to tell you that regarding books, there are various versions of Bhagavad Gita. We have the Advaita version of it by Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya's commentary and then Bade Baba's commentary. Then they can be Dvait, they can be Vishishta Dvait. So there are all these versions of it. So if you pick up a random text and start reading the commentary, it might take you completely differently. There is one teaching of Bhagavad Gita, very popular in the planet, which wants you to consider yourself as a servant of Lord Krishna. That's also one way, but that is not the way I am teaching you. So, if that's the way you should learn from the Acharya of that tradition, this I wanted to clarify. That the goal is not how much Bhagavad Gita you studied. The goal is not, I went through 8 chapters of Bhagavad Gita. The question is, how many chapters went through you? That's the goal. So there is no room for Shastra Vasana here. Some kind of a mind-based noodle approach to Bhagavad Gita. How much, how many mantras, how many chapters, how much did I do? It's like, hey, if you got few things and you live them, your life changes. So the whole goal, what happened was that he collapsed, his intellect collapsed, just like when somebody who has a drinking problem, they drink, at that time their intellect collapses and their mind surfaces to say, I deserve to drink. After all, my wife beats me every day, so I'm going to drink. After all, I didn't choose the president I have, so I will drink. You know, we can find any reasons to drink. Political one sounds kind of heavyweight. So I'll drink for following reasons. Then the next morning, the person regrets drinking and comes to people like me to say, I don't want to drink. Why they are doing this? Why they are regretting? Because now intellect is back. So what we don't want is a plunging intellect. First, if you don't have an intellect, you've only been leading a life of the mind, you must be suffering. Welcome home. Let's start activating your own intellect. Number 2, if your intellect plunges, you want to fortify it with the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. Because that is what happened with Arjuna. In the entire Mahabharata, he was nothing but the hero. And then comes Bhagavad Gita. Just before the Bhagavad Gita started, his intellect failed him and his mind made him such that Lord Krishna had to say to him, women fight in a certain manner, men fight in a certain manner. Who are you? You've lost your complete personality. What are you? You know, Lord Krishna had to be strong with him in the beginning, before he started enlightening him. He had to first, because the best way was to first give him an electric shock and wake him up. So he had become so weak. So that is one thing. And when the mind, what is the time? Last topic. When the mind is ruling us and not the intellect, there is a disease that occurs. It's a viral disease of the mind that occurs. And I've gone through it before, but I'd like to go over it again. It's a syndrome, and it's called Raga, Shoka, Moha syndrome. Like you have Vata Pitta Kapha, you have Raga, Shoka, Moha in Vedanta. Okay. What is Ragaha? Do you know? What is Raga? Attachments. What's wrong with attachments?
Doesn't make things fun anymore.
Doesn't make things fun anymore. Okay. So let us discuss Raga a little bit. These are also very basic teachings of what is Raga that I shall go over. There are two words. One is known as Ragaha. The other is known as Prema. Prema means love. Okay? Bhagavad Gita wants us to love. Bhagavad Gita doesn't want us to have selfish attachments. Raga. It's all about love. Ultimate love. It's a love song. It teaches us to become true lovers. So let us look at Rag. Most of us, in the name of love, have nothing but an attachment. And this attachment has certain qualities. Number one, the attachments that we have to our loved ones, they are manufactured with the thread of selfishness. We are attached because we want something from that relationship. Yes or no? If you look deep down. It's a selfish birthing ground is attachment. Whereas in love, there is selflessness. We love not for what we shall get. We just love, period. It goes into bhakti and devotion. And selfishness, number two, breeds a wanting. I want from that relationship. This is Raga. I want. This is the kind of love we have in the human beings. I love you because you fulfill me. Because you fill me up. These are all the songs out there. You fill me. You. What is this? Why were you empty first of all? Why should somebody fill you first of all? So it's not... I always have this Vedantic question, then I have to switch it off and, okay. So selfish, then I want, and then conditional. If you don't fulfill me, it's over, baby. Isn't it like this? This is the love we are professing to each other. It's all Raga. And because of the root of selfishness, want and conditionality, we are also naturally driven sooner or later to some adharma. We'll take some action, we will do something, some behavior that's going to be self-gratifying and it will harm another or the planet. Because we are consumers of attachments. We are attached. Let's look at prem, love. If it is love, it will be selfless. If it is love, it will also want. It's not that it will be some sacrificing martyr, but it will also think of what giving, what the other also wants. What does the other person want? It's not just my list of wants, my need for strokes, my need for esteem, my need for love, my need for comfort. There are many relationships, people come to me and say, why should I stay in the relationship? Where were my needs met? So after a long time I have to ask, did you meet any need? Oh, they were so obsessed with their needs. But in love, the person will think of giving, even before wanting. Give. And it won't be conditional. Yeah, Vidya, if you don't meet my need, I am not going. The person will continue loving. And so there will be dharma. Dharma shall be maintained. So wherever there is adharma, such as in Raga, sooner or later there is sorrow. Because papam karma, negative karma is created and sorrow comes back. And there is punyam, joy. Love, the person is selfless, the person is giving more, the person is not putting all these limits and conditions, and the person is holding on to dharma, and the person is looking younger than they are and joyful. And the other person who had all these attachments and grandiose attachments is becoming bitter, unhappier and unhappier, and getting smaller and smaller. And we have to acknowledge that raga is an issue that we all have, either towards objects or people. And then what this raga does is it leads to another complication, which is known as shoka, or frustration. We get frustrated, we get angry, we get frustrated. It brings in grief, self-pity, victimhood, and a lot of irritability, worry, frustration, a feeling of lack of empowerment because we're not getting our attachments, right? Shoka. And after shoka, the final stage happens, which is moha, in which we've kind of been doing adharmic things, we are manipulating, we want our needs met, we want that person in our life because it needs to fulfill us. So we're doing all of this. So by moha, our mind completely forgets what is the right path. And it starts believing that adharma, after all, I can have an affair. After all, it's okay for me to cheat occasionally. After all, we start justifying heavenly bargaining, because the mind has gone into a delusional stage, and dharma, adharma get confused completely. And so at this stage, the intellect has completely suppressed. So when we have moha, intellect, or delusion, mental delusion, intellect has suppressed, and the mind just feels justified in its victimhood, in its anger, in its bitterness, in its unethical actions. And then guess what happens? It becomes a syndrome. Because when one is in delusion, one has yet more attachments. And then one has yet more suffering, more frustration around managing those attachments, because attachments don't last. Those attachments are temporary. Living beings die or disappear or betray us because they themselves are suffering from raga, shoka, moha. Objects don't last. So these temporary attachments, we have all this happening, so it leads to yet more. So gradually, this is what I mean, it becomes a very uncomfortable, unhappy bowl of noodles. That's the mind then. Raga, shoka, moha whirled up into each other, and that is the typical mind. So, how interesting that Krishna, look at how unpretentious Bhagavad Gita is. Look at how real it is. It could have completely staged Krishna and Arjuna about to drink too much alcohol, one too many, a little bit social, okay, even healthy for you according to Ayurveda, but one too many alcohol. He's an alcoholic. And Krishna comes up in his beatific manner and says, "Oh my dear Arjuna, do not die drinking that alcohol, because you have raga to that alcohol, check, understand. So you will have shokaha when you don't get enough alcohol, and you have mohaha, so you are thinking that you're justified to drink it, and you're just harming yourself, and you think that's also okay. So you're all confused, and here, let me give you the sermon of Bhagavad Gita." Makes total sense. Instead, we have a very, very difficult situation where Arjuna has to actually kill his own grandfather. This is a very difficult situation. That is a designer difficult situation. He has to kill his own grandfather. He has to kill his own teacher of archery. Not because they are specifically bad or evil, but because they have, in their own version of dharma, sided with evil. And so therefore, Arjuna is taught about raga. He's having raga to them. So this is a little stark. It's a bit, but could we leave the teacher out of it? Could we just leave the grandfather out of it? How wonderful if he just had to kill the cousins. But this is where we get deluded between, but after all, I love this person. Haven't we heard of people who are sexually abused by their own family member and then they won't speak up about the family member? Why? Because I love that person. Doesn't that happen? Right? So so ultimately the question is, Arjuna, are you colluding with evil or are you colluding with truth? Satyam, dharma. So this is a very dire, direct teaching. Our life situations may not be such that we have to kill our grandfather or kill our archery teacher. But what it's really saying is that the stakes may be really high. And you may have to choose dharma. And you might want to have your intellect handy and not have a mental noodle blowout. And not have raga. And then first he had raga, oh, I am attached to them. I played on their lap, and oh, I need them around. Oh, a society without ancestors is useless society. All the men will die, then who will take care after the pitras and the yajnas? And he made all these arguments for his ragaha. Then he had shokaha, he was suffering, he was restless. And then he had mohaha. And he said, no, I think this is very non-dharmic. And I think the dharmic thing is to let the evil people rule. And I think the dharmic thing is for me to renounce, to go and live in the mountains. So that was all moha, because he completely had quit. And if he had quit, then entire India would be the descendants of those evil prince. So with this, I begin with a bang the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, and I hope that all of you walk away embellished by these words written by Baba in the foreword to the Adi Bhagavad Gita. This is in Hindi, so I'll translate to the best of my capacity in the moment. अंत में भगवान श्री कृष्ण जी महाराज से हमारी यही प्रार्थना है कि इस गीता के अध्ययन करने वाले लोग संग्रह से प्रेरित होकर निष्काम कर्म करें तथा सच्चाई, हार्दिक भक्ति और ज्ञान की सर्वांगीण से इस प्रकार अपने जीवन में कार्यरत रहे कि प्रत्येक अवस्था में और प्रत्येक स्थान पर समस्त प्राणी मात्र को अपना आप समझें और सब में उस सर्वव्यापी भगवान के विराट रूप का दर्शन करें, जिससे अपने सीमित अहम भाव को ब्रह्म की असीमता में विलीन कर सके। यही तो मनुष्य जीवन का अंतिम लक्ष्य है। Wow. So Baba is saying in the foreword that in the end, in conclusion, this is my prayer to Shri Krishna, that all the people who do the study, who do the learning of Gita, they get motivated to do nishkam, selfless karma yoga, and with great inner truth, and with deep reverence and bhakti, and with an alertness to jnanam, to self-knowledge, may they start leading their daily life in such a way that in all lifestyles and in all life situations, they look at all beings in this world, all creatures, and they see the one common self. They see their own self in all beings. And they see that God, Brahman, Sarvavyapi, who is dwelling in everything and everything. May we see their Virata Rupa, may we see them with these humble human eyes. May we see that Brahman. Like Arjuna got the darshan of Krishna in his Virat, in his full form as Brahman. He gave Arjuna that glimpse. May we all also get that glimpse of that ultimate reality which is ascending, but everywhere in every particle. So that simit aham bhav, so that this ahamkara, this tiny little collapsed self-oppressed, okay, becomes one with that seamless Brahman. After all, this is the goal of human life. These words of Baba, Bhagavad Gita. First class, and I invite all of you to continue 3 more classes with me over here, and feel free to invite your friends and family who you feel are ready for stretching their intellect and awakening it, because to tell others about Bhagavad Gita is an act of punyam. Jai Ma, everybody. We shall close with Asato Ma Satgamaya. In this mantra we chant from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. This is an Upanishadic mantra, and in this we chant, this is our prayer, this is our resolution for our own self. This our mother, father, uncle, cousin doesn't tell us. The Upanishad teaches truths that calm the mind and awaken the intellect. And Bhagavad Gita is the teaching of those Upanishads. And this Brihadaranyaka mantra we chant every night in the class, and I hope you chant every day in your homes, because it says that I want to journey. I personally want to journey. I was told you should do this, you should do that, you should do this. But here's what I want to do. I want to journey from the untruth that I'm a small, useless, shamed, broken, crazy person, to the truth that I am that profound being. I want to journey from the darkness of my mind to the light of knowing my own self through the same mind. And I want to journey from identification of who I am just with this body, which dies, to my immortal nature, my spirit. Asato ma satkamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om peace, peace, peace. And can you say Shri Krishna Vande Jagat Gurum. So throughout our Bhagavad Gita study, we are going to thank the Guru of this universe, Krishna, for giving us this brilliant teaching of Bhagavad Gita. And in the online study, in the more detailed study, we will do a more, what is it called in English? आस्तिक को क्या बोलते हैं in English? No. We will do a more we'll do a breakdown, and then we will also chant. We will also learn some chants to Bhagavad Gita itself. So we will pray. We will do a more prayerful study of the Bhagavad Gita, where I will teach you some chants which we will chant to the Bhagavad Gita herself, because she is considered a living goddess, and we will chant to her, and we will thank Lord Krishna, and then we will study, and also some very important shlokas which are like life-changing shlokas. I will teach you how to chant them also, so that you can chant them and know them. And mainly I invite you to listen, contemplate, and then use the knowledge in your emotional problems in life which is known as nididhyasana. Jai Guru.